Two of my grandsons have been wanting to go bear hunting in Hell's Canyon. Since Hell's Canyon is the deepest canyon in the northern hemisphere, they're going to be really macho and backpack in there with me, and we're going to see if we can find a bear. On this trip, they got a little more than they bargained for. We all strap our packs on and start up the trail. We've got 3 miles to walk along the Snake River, and then we climb up to bench level and start climbing for another 3 or 4 miles till we get to where we're going. The sunflowers are gently waving in a gentle Snake River breeze. As we move on up, and the first thing we find is a darn rattlesnake along the trail. The boys are wanting to catch him, but he's crawled back in the rocks, and then he takes a back door out, and no one wants to reach down there and roll a rock. Oh well, so what if that snake got away? That's only probably one of many that we'll see on this trip. So rather than take a chance on getting bit, and he sounds pretty serious with that hissing and rattling, the boys take a drink of water and we're ready to continue on up the trail. First across McGraw Creek and then up into Spring Creek. This has been a great year for berries, and if you have berries, you certainly should have bear. There's more berries than usual this year, and they're ripe and ready for a bear to eat them. We make it up to the first little bench overlooking the river, and so we're going to just roll our sleeping bags out and spend the night here. Then in the morning we'll get up at first light and start our way up. If there's some bear around, they'll probably be running around when it's nice and cool real early of a morning. So the boys clear away a little spot, cook a little something to eat, and then darkness sets in. The next morning we're up before it ever gets daylight, getting ready to proceed on the rest of our journey up the side of the deepest canyon in the northern hemisphere.
Put away. It was a great night, but all too short. Daylight came all too soon in the morning and finds us hiking up the side of the mountain face toward the bench of Hell's Canyon Wilderness Area. We look ahead, and there he is. One of the biggest old black bears I've ever seen is sneaking up through some sagebrush here. The boys are anxious to shoot at him, but I'm not going to let them take a shot at him. He's just plain too far away, and I think I know where he's going. So we're going to go up and see if we can cut him off at the pass. We puff our way to the top of the ridge, and here's where Mr. Bear was supposed to be going, but apparently he hadn't got the word and never showed up here. So we're going to just stash our tents and packs under some trees, and we're going to head on over to another spot and see if we can see a bear. We move up over a ridge and down across what was one time a hay meadow. There's pretty good grass growing here this year, and the old abandoned mowing machine is sitting here rusting away in the suns and rains and snows of Hell's Canyon, when people once lived here with no road and at least 7 or 8 miles to nearest neighbor, and that would be by horseback, only by trail. And so this mowing machine and everything else here had to be brought in on the backs of horses. At the old homestead, there's still some fruit trees growing, well over 100 years old, but they're still producing fruit. And this year in particular, there's just fruit everywhere at the orchard. We watched the orchard for a bit, and we're scanning the orchard, and across the little creek, what was once the alfalfa field, is a good spot to spot a bear. There's plenty of berries growing there now, and I'm keeping the eye on it. Then I see it suddenly, right in front of my eyes. There is the biggest old bear I think I've ever seen, walking out across the opens. The boys are all ready and ready to go. But yet I look at this bear again, and there seems to be a problem with him. He seems to have a hump on his back. Could he be a grizzly? I very carefully watch him, and that hump is very definite on his back, and he certainly looks to me like a grizzly. I talk to the boys and tell them not to shoot him. He looks like one of the grizzlies with the big hump on his back. The boys were already planning to make jerky out of him. 800 pounds of jerky, though, that would be a fair amount of jerky, and it might not have been too good. I heard those grizzlies aren't good eating like the black bear, although I've never tried one. But if we kill a grizzly, we're in big trouble with the United States Fish and Wildlife. They're an endangered species, and we could end up for a year in jail and a $5,000 fine. So I think we'll just pass him by and let him move on. Maybe another bear will be here. We wait and wait for another bear. Usually there'd be one, but this big old bear has probably chased them all away. Since a grizzly will eat a black bear, the only reason they don't eat more is first they have to catch them, and that's not easy, probably not worth the chase. We run out of water. Dustin goes down to McGraw Creek and fills our containers with water. Then I very carefully go down and look at the sad mess of what was once a very happy place. The McGraw Creek cabin sits in ruins, but oh well, they've built another cabin right next to it, and they have it partly finished now. Some of the old furnishings from the old McGraw Creek cabin have been brought in here. I guess the rancher probably built this to have it to use as a line shack when they're running cattle up here. And also, it's just a very pleasant place to vacation. After the cabin, I head back up where the boys are still watching for a bear, only hoping it isn't that old big one. We've named him Old Grizz by now. Hour after hour we sat here and wait for a bear. There should have been one in here by now, but apparently Old Grizz has taken care of that. The sunflowers are just blooming fantastic. The first year I've been up here at this time when there have been such nice sunflowers in bloom. This one even with a tiny insect setting on it. We watched the orchard for hour after hour, and still no sign of a bear. Old Grizz must have taken care of that, scaring them away, and besides, there's all kinds of berries and fruit just every place you look. There's plenty of berries and fruit and flowers. The butterfly mullein is still in bloom, as well as the gumweed. The butterfly mulleins an important flower. Chukars and game birds eat them really well for a winter feed. No bear showed up, so we moved back where we stashed our packs and set our camp up. We set it up on a hillside overlooking a big valley where we can look for old Fatso. That was the big black bear that we saw earlier in the morning. Apparently he's big enough that he doesn't worry about old Grizz. He could probably give him a pretty fair fight. We set up our camp. And then there's still some daylight left. So we're going down at the last light of day and check out the orchard. It's just loaded with apples. Some of these trees are over 100 years old and definitely look it, but they're still producing fruit. We see a tree here that the bear have broke down. We're going to get more water in our canteens now. We have to get enough water to do us for the night, since we don't have water where we're camped, and we're about 1.5 miles from the creek. We see bear droppings all over the place. There even is a pear tree with a few pears on it. And here is a piece from an old dump rake, some of the dumping mechanism. At one time there was a dump rake sitting here, but some fool rolled it down in the creek. A velvet ant rushes to safety across the floor of Hell's Canyon. There's some barbed wire near the cabin. This has been laying here for years. I guess they never got that fence built. We look in the old McGraw Creek cabin. There's the remains of an old antique bed still there, and the bears have ripped some of the siding off after insects. A lilac bush still grows good here. There was even a woman and some children lived here, so they had to have flowers for her. The choke cherries are just all over the place. I just gorged myself with these great big sweet choke cherries. We move back up to our perch again to watch for a bear, and we wait and wait and wait. A praying mantis enters the scene.
Did I step on you, Snaky? I'm sorry. I stepped on him by accident.
In the last light of day, as we were crossing the hay
Listen
meadow,
to him.
I
He's mad
stepped
now.
on a snake here.
He's mad.
It sure made him mad, and he sure did do some hissing. But he
Real
was
mad.
a non-venomous Great Basin gopher snake. They're restrictors, so they grab a hold of their prey with little holding teeth and wrap around it and squeeze them to death. After the snake, we move back up to our camp and retire for the night. Another all too short a night, and we camped on this hillside, and every time we'd roll over, the tent would roll down the hill. So the next morning we found ourselves sleeping on the side of our tent, and it was uncomfortable. The boys set the tents up, and they set them over some old hard cow tracks, and we had no pads, so that wasn't the greatest of sleep that night. But the next morning came early, and finds us up going back over to check the orchard. Dustin has lost his knife, so we have to go back and see if it's there. We go check the orchard. Again, nothing is there. So we're going to go up over the top of one of these mountains and see if we can find a bear up there. We're finally have puffed our way to the top of the mountain. From here, we can look out over Hell's Canyon. Down below us is the Snake River and Spring Creek drainage. Dustin is standing looking over the McGraw Creek drainage.
Okay, now
the old cabin
come on
is
down
right
this way
below
now.
us there, just a few miles down the mountain. We again replaced our water, and we brought a plastic milk jug from home, and Joe dropped it and it rolled down the mountain and broke. And uh-oh, there's a rattlesnake with his little rattles there. The boys have been wanting to try a rattlesnake and see how he tastes, so maybe they'll get the opportunity right now.
Okay, roll this rock right here. See, he's in a little hole there.
Knock him out.
Okay, hold him up. Up high. There.
Starting to bleed. Trying to crawl out of your hand.
We moved down into the shade of these old growth ponderosa here, and the boys are going to skin their rattlesnakes so they can take him back and enjoy him for dinner right in the shade of these old growth ponderosa. We look around and find some ant lions in the shade. The boys catch an ant, throw in the ant lion's nest, and we can see the ant lions after him. His single claw is trying to capture that ant. He'll reach up and grab the ant and drag the ant down below the soil where he'll kill him and eat him. And these ant lions make a little volcano-like shape. And then when an ant, and they always keep loose dirt around the edge, an ant will stumble into it. And once he's in there, it's a death trap. The lion will grab him right away and drag him down in the little volcano. But if he doesn't get him right away, the ant will spin out in the little volcano and give the lion a chance to grab him. We find the shell of a monster beetle laying by the ponderosa. Dustin reaches down with his finger just to show the size of the beetle. Joe grabs the beetle and we'll examine him a little bit before we go on about our business of checking out ant lions. The ant lion is hid down below the surface of the soil, and he reaches his single claw up there as fast as lightning, and he's grabbed that ant, and he's dragging the ant down in there. The ant futilely struggles for life itself, but there's no use. This ant lion has him in a death grip, and he's going to be nothing but dinner. We head back over to our campsite by now. Unfortunately, we didn't have much time for our bear hunting trip. The boys have to get back and get ready for school. We'll go on over and have Joe cook his rattlesnake. They'll test it and see how he is.
What are you doing, Joe? You getting ready to eat your rattlesnake?
Mm-hmm.
How's he taste?
Tastes like chicken.
He doesn't taste like snake?
Tastes like chicken that got bit by a snake.
It's not bad?
Nope. It's not too good either.
It's not real good?
No. Kind of bland.
Need some seasoning? You'd eat.
Not too hungry.
You're not hungry? I thought kids were always hungry.
Okay, sometimes.
Don't you want to try a piece?
I guess I could.
How was it?
We pack up and start our journey back down to the river, out, and then our way home, through a field of sunflowers, with their beauty all around the trail.
There's Joe doing up his belt. We're resting down there. Grandpa's down here by some plum trees, eating some plums.
The little baby plums are right below me. See them laying there?
Oops.
Look at them. Lots of them.
Where?
Right below me here.
Oh, yeah.
You got the camera?
Yeah, I got
Get a
it.
picture of one and then throw me. And get a picture of me.
Plum.
That's probably what that bear's doing in here. He's having him plums.
Probably. Maybe that's why we can't find any. Except that grizzly we found. So that's a poison oak. We just had to travel through it. There's a trail going through it. And over that hill, there's a cabin long ways. Goes like that, down the hill.
Okay.
I guess we can do that.
How was that one?
Real good.
We stopped for a brief rest in a nice cave here.
Since Joe broke the water jug, we're out of water, so we're drinking out of a mud hole.
How's the water, Joe?
It's good.
Is it nice and cold?
Yep, it's pretty wet.
That's the temperatures of water.
What's your mom going to say if you get Giardia?
We made it down to the Snake River, and I have a couple of pretty, tired, thirsty grandchildren with me. But we'll get some water, and we'll just spend the night right here. Then the next morning we'll get up and pick some of the wild fruit to take home to make some jam. The boys check their feet for blisters.
There's one that makes it look like I have bunions. Or corns or whatever that is.
Yeah, that's a good place.
My feet are awful pruny and
The boys spot a couple ears sticking up back behind the blackberries right behind our camp, and we look, and sure enough, they're attached to an old oh deer which went bounding off through the mulberry trees. There's a bumper crop of wild elderberries down along the river, and they're almost ripe. They're growing right alongside a plum tree. So we're going to pick a bunch of those plums, and the boys are going to take them home for their great-grandma to make them some plum jam. And oh boy, those were pretty good, just the way they came off the tree. We found a batch of grapes. The old moonshiners planted the grapes, and they've grown all over the hills here. They're not quite ripe yet. It'll be about a month before they're ripe, but there's just tons of them growing all over the hillside. So there's plenty of grapes for everything. The deer and bear alike love to eat these grapes. Some of them are growing up in trees, while others are just growing out across the ground. Some more of the wild elderberries growing alongside the little creek. Sometimes later in the year we pick a bunch of these and mix them about half with grapes and make some juice and can it. An old bear's been in that tree and broke one of the limbs off. We're not going to pick any grapes now because they're just plain not ripe. So we'll pick a few more plums and head the 400 miles toward home as soon as we get done looking at all the grapes as they're just barely beginning to turn. The bear will move in here and eat some of these grapes, but not quite yet. There are even some growing in a giant old mulberry tree. The mulberries have all dropped off. They're overripe. But wait a minute, there's a big old bear track right under the mulberry tree. He must have been down here eating some of these wild plums that Dustin's picking. Dustin'll pick that whole bucket full and a little more, and that'll be plenty for plenty of jam and jelly for the boys to eat. There's enough wild plums here we could have filled our pickup full of them. But we're in a hurry to get home and get these boys ready for school. So we'll move on. And there's a nice sight, a little buck deer. I wonder if he knows the next day archery season's going to start. He better hide those little horns or somebody will be poking an arrow at him. He slips through the trees, trying to make himself invisible. And then, pretty soon, he can't take it anymore. He bolts out of the trees and runs out ahead of us for all he's worth. He better be careful is all I can say. And back to the tunnel and through the tunnel, and we're out in civilization once more, and now those boys can worry about school. The big bear we saw, we took a picture of him and took it to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they said he was a black bear, not a grizzly bear, just a black bear.
The Fish and Wildlife guy asked me what state I saw the bear in, and I told him in Oregon. He said, "Oh, well then, it's definitely a black bear. There are no grizzly bears in Oregon." But I'm not sure I agree with his decision on that. I guess everyone can decide on their own what that bear is.